Hello, beautiful people. We are in the mood to give you an important update. And this update is based essentially on a very important development in our community. I want to let you know that we are finally getting it right. When I say we, I mean the Igbos who were born, who grew up in the territories of the Hebrew Federation of Republics that some people chose to call Igbo land, or the territory of the Nigerian state, which that Igbo land is now a part of. And the other group of Igbos whom you find in the African American community, the other group you'll find in the Caribbean community, and another group of Igbos you'll find in the Afro Latino community. And interestingly, a few Jews who have found this community a place to see as home. The groups I listed have one thing in common. They are all descendants of the biblical Israelites who were thrown out of the land of Israel primarily when the Assyrians, the Babylonians, rampaged through the land of Israel, and they moved into Egypt. And from Egypt, they trundled down through the place you find the desert today and found a home in West Africa. They are all descendants of those Hebrews. And as you know, if you are familiar, and I believe everybody that follows this channel is very, very familiar with world history from 1900 to present day, I give a very broad outline so that everything will come into what we are discussing now. Some 500 years ago, the nations of Europe came to Africa and carted off millions of Africans. What the followers of this channel may not know was that Igbo land produced the coast that was called the Slave Coast on a nation-by-nation basis. Igbos suffered more than any group in Africa from the ravages of the transatlantic slave trade. In other words, if you are looking at the Caribbeans and the African American society on a nation-by-nation basis, if you are looking at the groups of Africans that ended up there on a nation-by-nation basis, Igbos produced more of the victims, by far more than any other African group. We don't need to get into why the Igbos were the primary victims, because it's not the purpose of this talk. The purpose of this talk is that these groups are finally getting it together. They are coalescing. They are coming together as a family again. And you know by what? Religion is bringing them together again. The tireless group called the Men and the Defenders, the tireless group called the Men and Defenders, organizes weekly Shabbat services. And this Shabbat service, you find Igbos born in the Federation of Republics, that is, the ones still associated with Igbo land in Nigeria. You find African Americans of Igbo extraction. And by the way, you find Caribbeans of Igbo extraction. This requires a talk. I am saying, as somebody who has studied this subject academically, systematically, it is basically and practically impossible today to find an African American or a Caribbean in the world today who is not connected to the Igbos either by blood and by culture, or by blood and by culture. I had the privilege, if you want to use the word privilege, because it was a journey of tears to study African American history when I was going through my MA studies at the Florida International University. It was a journey of tears. When I began to look at the history of Prophet William Saunders Crowdy, the tears began to roll when I saw what African Americans passed through. But it was also beneficial because from there, I was able to understand what I just mentioned, that it is impossible to find an African American and a Caribbean who does not have some Igbo blood. And remember, I mentioned culture. The Western culture, which is the culture undergirding the Americas. What I'm going to say is not going to be controversial, but if you find it controversial, look for my book called Broken Paradise. The Igbo culture is the finest variant, or rather, I want to be modest. The Igbo culture, you can compare Western culture to Igbo culture. You can compare Western culture to Igbo culture. I'm struggling to be modest. But why do I say this? The West aspires to democracy. The Igbos produced the first and purest democracy the world has ever seen. Participatory democracy. Everybody participated. The world will still hear from these people when they are ready. The people are still being rebuilt. So, back to the point I was making. Members of this family are coming together every Shabbat and festivals. Members of this widely dispersed family are coming together every Shabbat. And as you must know, the genes do not glue people together. What bonds people together is religion. And all of them are bringing very important things to the table. Our brothers and sisters who have spent centuries in the Western world, there is something you are bringing. Something that, I don't know how to handle some of these things so that I won't be misunderstood. Something that environment took away from the ones in Nigeria. The Igbos in Nigeria could move mountains, but the environment has softened them. The 12 months of summer and the culture in Nigeria. There is a culture in Nigeria which doesn't generate and produce growth. Nigeria is one of the poorest countries in the world today. 99% of Nigerians have extreme difficulties finding food once a day. But do you know that the Nigerian government budgeted billions of naira to send people on pilgrimage to Mecca and Jerusalem and Rome? I don't see any Western country engaging in that when people are having difficulties eating. That's what the comfort quote of the 12-month summer generates where the Igbos were thrown into. And our brothers and sisters who found themselves brutally removed from that environment have become tougher. That's why today you can count many dollar billionaires in the African American community. That's why when you talk about the two greatest philosophers who walked through music, the greatest philosopher, Bob Marley, the greatest entertainer, Michael Jackson. Forget about people that try to say, why not use products of the greatest universities to show our achievements? And I'm telling you that Michael Jackson was a genius. Bob Marley was also a genius. The environment forced them. They became achievers. So you bring this, and we bring the rituals of Omenana. Not that we are not tough too. The ones that we are raised in Nigeria are also as tough as nails. But I'm telling you that the ones raised in the West, I would give them, where I will give them 90%, I will give the ones raised in Nigeria. If I give the ones raised in the West 90%, I will give the ones raised in Nigeria 80%. And you see all of them coming together every Shabbat, discussing how to bond themselves together, discussing how to build together. Everybody will benefit. Everybody in the world will benefit as this bonding, as this building continues to develop. And please, ladies and gentlemen, subscribe. Ask your friends and family to subscribe. And have a good week. Thank you.